What's going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and it is time for another video. But this isn't an unboxing. It's not an interview. It's not name that character. Mrs. Bearded's not here. It is time for a comic book video talking about the Amalgam Universe. That's right. This is the universe that we got DC versus Marvel fights, and out of that spawned the creation of combining characters like Batman and Wolverine, creating Dark Claw, or Superman and Captain America and creating Super Soldier. And it's such a cool thing. And there's all these videos about it. But I want to do an in-depth video series talking about the Amalgam series, all the books in the Amalgam series. We're going to be reviewing them all. We're going to be talking about the DC versus Marvel books that started it all and where this kind of originated from. So, with that being said, let's talk comics. That's right. So we are going to be talking about the Amalgam series. This is something that if you were a kid at all in the 90s, you knew about this event, this DC versus Marvel event that in the midst of the event spawned off these creations of the Amalgam comics. These one-shots where they combined some of our favorite superheroes of adding Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate and Professor Xavier all together and combining Iron Man and Green Lantern to make Iron Lantern, and it just all these different combinations that you as a kid would probably be like, that's a fantastic idea. And some of these people love these books. Some of these books probably aren't the best. And so what this series is going to do, we're going to go back through and I'm going to talk about a different Amalgam book each series. And so there's 24 different Amalgam books. What happened was DC vs. Marvel started this event, this DC vs. Marvel event. It was a 4-issue series. You had DC vs. Marvel was issue 1, and then it was Marvel vs. DC for issue 2 verse 2 and 3. And then the 4th issue was DC vs. Marvel. So they rotated, they split who got the head title, right? When it was Marvel vs. DC or DC vs. Marvel, because they're both big boys and they both want their own share of who's up front. And through this series, after issue 3, it started the Amalgam series. So in between issues 3 and 4, they released 12 Amalgam comics. So they released their first 12 issues of these one-shots that were things like, I said, Wolverine and Batman come together. It's Legends of Dark Claw. Things like that. So we're going to look at those, and then they release issue 4. After that, there was a series called DC All Access. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about then the other 12 shots they did a year later, 12 one-shots that they did a year later from the Amalgam series, where then you had stuff like Adventures of Dark Claw and the animated series style and other stuff like that. And we're going to look at each book and we're going to try and figure out which ones still are cool, which ones are, if they're all still cool, if they're all like, really? Because I remember reading these as a kid and loving everything about it. So we have to start, though, with the DC versus Marvel books. And what's really cool about these is these were the culmination of everything we hope for as fans, right? Who's better, DC versus Marvel? We have these debates all the time. We still have these debates. We argue with each other. Well, DC comics are better, and Marvel comics are better. Well, the Marvel movies are better than the DC movies, and well, the DC animated movies are better than anime. And it's on. And so these are the just culminations of everything that we as nerds love. And in this series, what you get is that DC and Marvel Universe are represented as two separate entities. But they are both in comic form here represented as what these kind of entities called the brothers. So they're physical kind of godlike beings that the entirety of the Marvel Universe and the entirety of the DC Universe resonate in. And they kind of get awoken from their sleeper and they realize from their slumber and realize that they don't like each other, and so they start to fight, and different characters start to get sent to different worlds. Like you see Spider-Man in Gotham City, so Spider-Man matches up with the Joker there, or you see Bullseye from the Daredevil universe, get thrown into the Batcave and he's holding a knife up to Robin, and then Robin gets transported into the X-Men universe with Jubilee's bedroom, and like it just buck wild, like everyone's going different places. And so as all this stuff's starting to happen and splinter off, the brothers decide that they're going to have a basically contest of they're going to take their superheroes from their universes and they're going to put them in the combat, and whoever wins wins. So it's not like a death match, but it's basically like a wrestling match. If you get pinned or beat, like you're out. Like it's a one shot, like, oh, I've knocked you out this fight, game over. There's not like, well, who would be ultimately always win, right? Because people sometimes say Batman will always lose his first fight, but he'll never lose his second fight, because that's what he does as a detective. But that's not what this is about. This is looking at this first time that you guys are matched up, first interaction, what happens. And so there were 5 heavy hitter fights. You had your Superman, your Hulk, and things like that. And then there were 6 kind of sub fights in the books. So you had your Jubilee versus Robin, your Captain Marvel versus Thor, all these different things. And the big heavy hitter are ones that were written in the books, that the writers decided who were going to win those fights. But then there were 6 that were left up to who the fans were going to vote for. And you could write letters in, you could email in, all these different ways that you could vote for who you wanted to win these fights, who you thought. And so they had scorecards on the back, right, of each issue. They kind of had a checklist of each issue of where you're at. So issues 1 and 2, they kind of start this idea and this concept. So we're going to look at this series a little bit more in depth, but I want to do this in some short videos. So you can just pop on for 8-10 minutes, listen, be like, cool, this is something I'm interested in. This isn't something I'm interested in. And just keep it going. Because I see a lot of this, there's so much content to unpack that people just throw it all into like a 6 or an 8 minute video. And I'm like, no, we need to dig deeper into it. So with that being said, we kind of gave you the overview of what this series is going to be. We're going to be talking about issues 1, issues 2 of DC versus Marvel, Marvel versus DC, and we're going to talk about issue 3. And then at the end of issue 3, that launches into where you get the first 12 of the Amalgam series. So then we're going to break down all of those. We'll talk about issue 4, who wins the final battle. And I hope this is just something that you guys have fun with and like. So if this is something that you're down for, or you have some ideas of what you want to see maybe differently than what I just said, make sure you guys leave some comments below. Let me know, are you excited for this? Do you remember the Amalgam series? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Have you read it recently? If you're not subscribed to the channel and you're new to this because this is something that you're like, ooh, I want to check it out. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave some comments, and as always, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.